Rest in peace, former Secretary of State George Shultz, who helped President Reagan, defeat the Soviet Union and win the Cold War back when America used to try to defeat her enemies. Actually, during the Trump administration, there was a good dose of that as well, but we seem to have a desire to leave that behind when it comes to communist China, which I think is a fair... there's a lot of fair comparisons to be made between the former Soviet Union and the current communist China. One fun story, this is George Shultz talking to Brian Lamb on the occasion of his release of his autobiography, his memoir. And Shultz recalling this test that he made all foreign ambassadors take before they were dispatched to their assigned nation. And how it changed when recognized statesman Mike Mansfield was asked that question by Shultz.
When I was, in the first period when I was Secretary of State, there was in my office a big globe. And when ambassadors who were newly going to their post or in their posts and coming back to visit me would get ready to leave, I would say to them, "Ambassador, you have one more test before you can go to your post. You have to go over to the globe and prove to me that you can identify your country." So unerringly, they would go over and they'd spin the globe around and they'd put their finger on the country they were going to. Pass the test. So Mike Mansfield, great elder statesman in America, former Senate Majority Leader, and had been ambassador to Japan for a while before I was there, and he was a close friend of mine from back when I was in the Nixon administration. So he was visiting and he got ready to leave. I said, "Mike, I've got to give you the same test I give everybody else. Before you can go back to Japan, you've got to show me that you can go over the globe and put your finger on your country." So he went over and he spun the globe around and he put his hand on the United States. He said, "That's my country." So I've told that subsequently to all the ambassadors going out. Never forget, you're over there in that country, but your country is the United States. You're there to represent us, take care of our interests, and never forget it. And you're representing the best country in the world.
How come?
That was back when we believed in this antiquated idea of American exceptionalism. For more on George Shultz, as well as President Biden, pleased to be joined for our weekly conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Your reflections on Secretary of State Shultz?
Well, he was a great servant of President Reagan, and he did what you're supposed to do, which is support the strategy of the president. One of the interesting things is that I often point out when I talk to what makes a good presidential team is actually he and Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense, did not get along, and they were constantly at loggerheads, and that was a challenge for the president, and actually probably led to Iran-Contra because they couldn't be of one mind on Latin America policy, and so the president just turned to the NSC and said, "You guys do it." Of course, the NSC botched it, but it's the importance of a president and Secretary of Defense, the State Secretary, and the National Security Advisor kind of all being on the same page. The flip side of that is you don't want the Obama model, where everybody was on the same page because they all did what the president said, and there wasn't that challenging of assumptions. To me, that's the real mark of presidential leadership. The kind of the team of rivals things. Lincoln's kind of trite, but it's actually very, very accurate. The president wants strong leaders who will debate policies, but in the end, support their president. Much in the way that Shultz disagreed with Reagan on some arms control issues, but at the end, Reagan said, "I'm the boss. I'll make a decision." And actually, Reagan was right. And that's the way you want to do it. So,
and Shultz admitted he was right, too, about some of those disagreements as well. And Shultz, by the way, since Reagan was the amiable dunce, just a quick Reagan tangent, according to Clark Clifford, Reagan was right. Shultz was a guy who graduated from MIT in industrial economics, so no dummy either. Just a quick aside, when it's always if they're not evil, then they're stupid. Lines of attack from the left. Now, I want to contrast our conversation about the evil empire in the Cold War with what we heard from Biden this week on Face the Nation about President Xi, and see if you can make heads or tails of this. By the way, just as a predicate, I recall a time when offering mealy-mouthed compliments to dictators or in the direction of dictators was a national security threat.
He's very bright. He's very tough. He doesn't have, and I don't mean as a criticism, just a reality, he doesn't have a democratic small d bone in his body. But he is, the question is, I've said to him all along that we need not have a conflict, but there's going to be an extreme competition. And I'm not going to do it the way that he knows this, because he's been sending signals as well, that I'm not going to do it the way Trump did. We're going to focus on international rules of the road.
Not exactly evil empire stuff, Jim.
Well, first of all, the way you described the relationship is exactly the way Trump described the relationship. And people excoriated Trump for it. Look, it just goes to show that there wasn't much depth to the analysis of Trump's foreign policy. But the other thing is that people totally miss about Trump's foreign policy is strategic leadership is rhetoric and action. With powers like Russia and Trump knew this, action matters, words don't. They could care less. President Biden believes that rhetoric really matters. And it doesn't. The Chinese don't care what you say; they care what you do. And if I have a criticism of this administration coming out of the box in regards to China, it's all a bunch of blah blah verbiage. There isn't any real action that either we or the Chinese could judge, and that is really essential to establish that relationship. And this is the most important. And I really think. I mean, that was just a swing and a miss when he talked about democracy. I mean, look, people have to understand the difference between us and the Chinese, not just Americans, but everybody around the world, because you need to pick a side. We fundamentally, even Democrats, Republicans, Trump, Biden, when you scrape it all away and everything else, we all do believe in human rights. We all do believe in freely elected governments, and we all prefer a free market capitalistic system. The Chinese don't believe in any of those things. They see all of them actually as obstacles to their expansion of their power and influence. And if we won't clearly stand up for our equities, the United States and friends and allies around the world, the Chinese will try to eat our lunch. So even though words don't matter much, Biden's words were actually kind of damaging in the sense that, you don't share our equities, but that's kind of okay. This notion that somehow we're going to compete with China in some places and we're going to work together in others, this is a silly liberal progressive notion that makes no sense. Everywhere where China and where it's important for the U.S., our interests clash. So, I mean, we might cooperate on the drapes, but on every issue of vital interest, the Chinese are going to be on the wrong side of this. So the model of competition cooperation, it's kind of stupid.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel, don't you think Biden should make China pay for unleashing this virus on us? Whether it be accidental something's got to give.
Well, he should, in the way that, Trump made Mexico pay for the wall, in the sense that in the end, Trump forced Mexico to cooperate with the United States in a way that addressed the problem. And we've seen no sign of this from this administration. Look, I think they'll probably be okay on things like Taiwan and the South China Seas, because those are real, I think, raw nerves of Indo-Pacific policies. They'll continue to work with allies, but are they going to be a moral driving force the way Reagan was in the Cold War or the way Trump was against China? I don't see a signal of that right now. And that's what we really need. We don't need a president who's good enough on China. We need a president who's historic on China.
Speaking of, since you made the comparison to the border security, let's talk a little border security. Biden signed an executive order end of last week, denying state and local governments any authority to reject drop-off of refugees into their towns and communities, even as he has reinstituted catch and release for asylum seekers. He also has ordered immigration officials to stop warning illegal migrants caught trying to scam the system that they might face deportation because it causes, quote, undue stress, unquote.
Well, all of these things are things which seem like nice, but they really are the opposite. Look at the refugee policies, where somehow we've equated numbers with morality. And the reality is, first of all, if you just jack up the numbers, all you're doing is clogging the system because we can't process them fast enough. So you're actually making it more difficult to serve truly needy refugees. And what Trump demonstrated is the real way to serve the world's refugees is to stop having them jump on the road. So the United States, for example, cooling the civil war down in Syria and stopping mass refugee exodus, helping countries deal with Venezuela, that was much, much more helped refugees in the world infinitely more than just saying jacking up the number, which is ridiculous. On the other side, look, everything you do to encourage more illegal immigration just encourages more illegal immigration, and that brings with it not just a flood of more illegal people here, but it also brings a mass human catastrophe. Illegal migration leads to human trafficking, sexual exploitation, innumerable health issues, not just COVID. It is a moral crisis, and this is, I think, exemplars the great irony of liberal policies is they pretend that they're moral, but actually the outcomes they're generating are the opposite. And I would say that all these policies is nobody voted for this. Immigration and border security was not an issue on the campaign trail, and that was because most Americans, even people that like open borders, they kind of like the fact that unemployment was way down. They like the fact the border was secure. They like the fact we were battling the cartels. All Biden's doing is enabling all the bad things of immigration and border policy.
Inside the Beltway, politicians carry on about institutional norms a lot, or they do a lot when it serves their interests. What about the institutional norm that Joe Biden has suspended, that of providing classified intelligence briefings to the previous president? That is no more because of Trump's erratic behavior, so says President Biden. Is that a big deal?
Well, I've heard conflicting reports on that. I've also had they said, well, that's up to the intelligence community to decide. But I don't think the intel briefings to former presidents are actually a big deal. But what I do think it does is it reflects civility, which Biden has done nothing to demonstrate that he wants a more civil nation and to treat people more civilly. And they say something like that. No president has ever spoken about a former president like that. Trump never said anything bad about Obama. You didn't deny him intelligence briefings. So it's just another mark of the loss of civility in America.
Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelley Cullum Davis Institute of International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.